Oh, there it is. That's not right. There we go. This is the right class, right? Yeah, okay. Check, check. All right. Nope. There. Cool. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's exciting? Good to see you. Hope your weekend went well. What are we doing? Module 2. Gotta get organized here for organizational behavior. Oh, I'm getting some folks jumping in here. So welcome, welcome. Make some noise. Let me know that I can hear that you can hear me. So I've been having a little trouble with some of the settings lately, but I think I've been doing this enough where now I can kind of self-diagnose some of the problems. But I always appreciate feedback. Hey Seth, how are you? So hope things are well. Max, how are you? What's good right now? Oh, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, no, everything's been pretty chill. There's no football this weekend. There will be this coming weekend. So this last weekend was pretty chill. Hey, Kara, how are you? And yeah, no, everything's pretty laid back right now. So there are some what is it? There were some updates from the campus and things like that, and I did post an announcement on that here, yeah, the other day. That was on Friday. I think Thursday, word came out. Yeah, go Bucks. Yeah, so, I don't know. I've never been a fan of the Buccaneers. I don't ascribe to all the Tom Brady hate that's going on out there. I think I've talked about that in this class. Maybe that was during the Zoom meeting last week. I can't remember. But yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. I don't know. My money is it keeps kind of going back and forth. I wouldn't put money on this game, all right? But I think we're going to have, one of two types of Super Bowls. So, because so many times we have like the lukewarm ones, and so it's either going to be a defensive showdown or it's going to be an absolute gunfight. Chiefs in 4? Yeah, all right. So, yeah. I don't know. I'd give a slight edge to the Chiefs, but, the Bucks, they're pretty strong. And I mean, they got the guy. They got Mr. Postseason. So, I mean, yeah, no, I kind of agree. But at the same point in time, it's for me, it's too close to call, and I just don't know that much about football. Even so, there's a bar that I go to, and one of the guys there, one of the bartenders there, man, I trust his opinion explicitly when it comes to football. I mean, the guy could be a book. I mean, he could easily, be a bookmaker, and he won't call it. Yeah, exactly. So, but no, that's been the extent of my activities over the weekend, and we'll see how it goes. So, with this weekend, I don't have any plans on going anywhere. I'm just going to enjoy the game at home. So, which has been kind of the rule lately, I suppose. But anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So we got this update from the campus, and some conflicting messages were coming out here and there regarding, return to work and stuff. And I think that there's some wires that are getting crossed between like faculty and staff and students and things like that on that one. The word that I got was that we have to ask permission to be able to come back to campus, and permission is being granted on kind of a case-by-case basis at the discretion of the provost. And most of it is based upon, like, do you need access to specialized facilities? So it's chemistry class or nursing class or AIM classes, things like that are probably going to get dibs on that because there's a testing constraint. And so according to, the whole, the COVID terrorism dial or whatever it is, the color wheel, we still require testing. And there's a testing constraint on campus, meaning that we just don't have access to as many tests as they thought. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to have to check with the nursing faculty on this one. So I work with those folks, and they probably give me a little bit more of, I guess, a grainy story, than what we have. But so I posted this up here. We are still remote. We'll have a discussion about whether or not we want to, pursue getting permission to come on the campus here. But unless we see massive rollout of vaccine adoption here on campus, and of course that requires access, which very few people actually have. My mom actually did manage to get her first round. But she's over 80, and so, she's way in line before any of us. And so we're just going to have to see. So we're going to run with the plan the way that it is for right now, and then wait to see if some of those bottlenecks, get sorted out and things like that. But I do want you to understand that you can complete this class 100% online, even if we do get the opportunity to actually come back and meet on campus. All right? So, with that and the fact that they're not even approving any of these for at least another 2 weeks, we're going to plan on just doing it this way for the time being. I hope it's working for a lot of you. I mean, I'm a little bit put out by it myself a little bit because this is a class that I like to, we usually have a lot of fun in this class. Because I have all these activities and things that we usually do that we just can't really do. Although I have actually over the last, I'd say, week, come up with some new ones and some ones that I want to try. All right. So, and it'll be completely online format, but I'm a big believer in simulation, meaning I like to put you in situations where you actually get to manage things and get to control and get to learn some of the skills hands-on, so to speak. But even in the testing restraints, even if they clear all those up, we're still going to have to social distance and things like that. So I can't see us like sitting around the table doing like, hiring negotiations and salary stuff and things like that I usually like to do. So we're going to have to find a way to make it work here. All right. And so on Wednesday this week, we're going to do our Zoom meeting. All right. But it's going to have a little bit of a twist to it. All right, so I've found a simulation that I've done in the past, and it works really, really well, and I think I can make it work via Zoom. So, but I'm going to need your cooperation with that. So, definitely on Wednesday, make it if you at all possibly can, because I want to try this. It's going to be kind of a learning process, but also at the same point in time, I think it could be a heck of a lot of fun. All right, because one thing that I noticed last week, all right, and maybe you can give me some feedback on this one, depending on how you feel about it. So post up in the comments, email me, whatever. But whatever you're comfortable with. But I noticed this. So when I have discussions in the Zoom room with smaller groups, like of 8 or so, they're really interactive and things like that. The thing that I noticed with ours last week is since there's like 30 of us, all right, that maybe we need to organize those a little bit better because there's just not that much because I think a lot of people, if they want to speak up, they get stepped on by somebody else, things like that. Maybe that's just a management thing, but it's not something I truly anticipated because I didn't anticipate having such a large class. And so, I think that one kind of turned into a little bit more of a lecture. And that's not the point behind that. So we're going to try something a little bit different this Wednesday. But comments, concerns, suggestions, always welcome on those. And at the same point in time, bear with me here just a little bit because we're trying to sort this out as we go. But at the same point in time, I want to make sure you're getting your money's worth out of this class, all right? And so I've got something planned for you on Wednesday. That'll be a little bit more along those lines. Today, we're going to just do a straight-up lecture, and we'll do trivia, all right? So I need a trivia topic that we can kind of sink our teeth into. And, of course, if you answer the trivia topic correctly, whatever question I find or ask, and post it up there in the comments, your answer. Of course, I'll knock off one of the mastery exercises for you. They're not worth that many points, but it's another thing that's off your plate. So if you can actually, get your answer punched in there faster. Google's totally fine, so as well. But I need a trivia topic, so think of one, post them up there, debate them out, all right? But because if by the time I get to that, we'll have to have that sorted out here. And so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to shoot for about an hour today and then get at least 3 rounds of trivia in. And so here we go. All right, so last week we spent a lot of time talking about we were talking about worst job experiences out there. That's right. So, and this week we're going to start to transition in some of the more meatier portions of the class, but last week is just kind of like give you something to think about in some respects. With this one in particular, we're going to start to dive into some of the more weighty topics here. And so we are on Module 3 now. Did I post on that? I don't think I did. So we're not on Module 3. We just started Module 2. That's right. So shoot, I thought I posted up on that. I'll fix that here. Right after class, but Module 2, so the individual class is broken into basically 3 pieces, all right? And these 3 modules, 2, 3, and 4, are all going to deal on one basic, the probably the larger chunk of what I need you to take away from the class, and that's dealing with individuals, okay? So as a manager, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have to find ways to actually codify, classify, and design around individual preferences, but you're going to have to do so more so as a group than as each individual person, all right? But we're going to study individuals, and we're going to think about what makes up people, individual mood, personality, emotion, things like that, before we dive into things like motivation theory, and then some of the more practical tools like communication, negotiation, before we get into anything that deals with teams, all right? So notice that we don't get to team, group dynamics, team properties, team process, and, basically team building until Module 5. And that's because we need a good foundation of understanding, okay, so if we're going to put people on a team, what makes up a person, all right? And so finding ways to manage to this is probably the first step in becoming a more effective manager, is to start thinking about people in terms of commonalities rather than differences, okay? Differences are absolutely important, but just think about it, just the combinations and permutations that actually occur on a team of 15 different people. Each one of those each one of those individuals has a personality that's made up of multiple components. They each have different moods, they have different mindsets, they have different values, different ethics, things like that. And so if you try and really dive into all the differences, you start to, it becomes an overwhelming management problem before you even get started, okay? And so it's perfectly fine if you're a frontline supervisor or a team lead and you have 5 or 6 people working for you. Absolutely, dive into all the nuances on those and find ways to actually tailor jobs to individuals as much as you possibly can. But also at the same point in time, you're with an MBA under your belt, you're going to get past that point really quickly in your career where now you're managing 10 or 15 or 30 or 100 people. And all of a sudden it just becomes an impossible task to actually know everybody on that intimate of a level. To be able to actually interface with them effectively one-on-one becomes much, much more difficult in a situation like that. So it's better to start thinking about common differences commonalities amongst individuals who work for you rather than differences. And that's what we're going to focus on for the next couple of weeks. All right, and so let's just dive right in, shall we? Module 2, here we go. Chapter 2 is our diversity chapter. We're going to come back to that one, all right? I promise, all right? So, I know that the thing that you read up on last week, if you're following along with the readings and things like that, there's a lot of good stuff in there. But when we come back and we talk a little bit more seriously about HR and human resources law in particular, we'll resurrect that topic. It's one that I know that you get in just about every management class. And just about every business class nowadays has some kind of that component to it. I'm not neglecting it, all right, but I'm going to do that one a little bit different. We're going to come back to that one. Let's dive into chapters 3 and 4 in greater detail. And so 3 this week, 4 next week. That'll wrap up module 2. And then, like I said, when we get to more of the HR design stuff, we're going to go back and revisit chapter 2 at that point in time, all right? For right now, not so much, all right? Because I think it's more important to understand, non-obvious differences between people in the beginning. And so here we go. Let's do this one out of the book. So, because the book's a little bit better than my slides. So slides are a little bit brief. So that's okay. If you want the Cliff Notes version, go for it. All right. So chapter 3, understanding people. All right. So, the first thing that we need to dive into here is this piece right here, the role of job fit, all right? And so person job fit is something that Dr. Gilbraith and I spend a lot of time researching out there in the wild. And it's probably one of the good things, or one of the best things to dive into as a manager early on, is start to understand that, jobs are designed for a certain function, certain purpose, and then you have to find people that fit those jobs, okay? And sometimes you can tweak the job, and sometimes you can tweak the person, but sometimes these are two immovable objects in some ways, all right? And so diving into the nuances of what makes up an individual person goes hand in hand with understanding the functions and the purpose of a specific job, okay? And so, you have to think about, there's actually 2 pieces to this. There's what we call person job fit, and then there's what we call person organization fit. And you can have mismatches in between those. Those mismatches right there, boom, those are the cause of about 90% of your management problems, okay? And so when we get involved in management in the beginning, think big, all right? What are the big problems? What are our most effective ways to solve problems before we start diving into the weeds, the nitty-gritty, so to speak? And so person organization and person job fit is a really important topic and particularly relates to this chapter, all right? And so because person job fit in particular actually affects work behaviors. And so a lot of times we'll see there's things like personality mismatches or job conflicts or things like that don't really affect job performance when it comes down to it. Maybe it results in slightly lower employee satisfaction, or maybe you have one individual who's got a higher proclivity to turnover or something like that because they don't necessarily fit with the job. But there's nothing really necessarily wrong about the job itself. Okay? But when you do have someone who has a very poor person job fit, all right, then you actually start to see some performance deficiencies, work behaviors that manifest themselves in ways that, you have to deal with as a manager. And the same thing's true for person organization fit. Okay, and so let's kind of dive into these in a little bit greater detail. There's a lot of research on this stuff out there, all right? It's really good, all right? But just in a basic nutshell, person organization fit is how well does your own personal makeup, your values, your beliefs, your moods, your job preferences, how well does that fit with the organization as a whole? Okay, so for example, you can have an organization where your job fit is pretty bad. All right, so you feel underutilized, you feel overskilled for the job doesn't offer you a lot of autonomy, things like that. There's not much room for progression or promotion, which is really kind of what you want out of the place. But you love the organization itself. All right, so the organization has some kind of mission, some kind of purpose, or maybe it's just the people that you work with that you really enjoy working with to a certain level where you can ignore a lot of that stuff that doesn't really fit about the job because you feel an affinity towards the organization itself. This is more common in certain industries than it is in others. Okay, so, I don't think anybody in the insurance industry is too terribly passionate about working for Progressive specifically. Maybe USAA or something like that, because it's got a slightly different spin on it. But in a lot of those kind of the bulwark of the American economy kind of businesses out there, there's not a lot of like organizational affinity. Now, if you start to move into specialized industries, you start to see a lot more of that. So like finance, if you go into finance and you get a job with Goldman Sachs, all right, so that's like, or BlackRock or something like that, that's kind of like top tier, all right? And so, I mean, you kind of assume some of that and you're willing to put up with a lot of crap on that job because you like to have the card that says Goldman Sachs on it. Maybe that's a little bit, some people would see that as distinctly not a badge of honor. And so maybe that's not the best example. And so more often than not, you find this in like service organizations, okay? Ones or like nonprofits, all right? Where people are very proud that they work for the Red Cross or the military. You see this in the military all the time where people will put up with absolutely horrible jobs, but they love being in the Navy, kind of thing. And so you'll find that sometimes organizational fit, and if there's a good person-organization fit, that actually overrules a lot of the person-job fit problems. Person-job fit is more specific, all right, to the individual and to the job. You can work for a terrible organization that's just riddled with evil people, but if you really love your job, okay, because say it fits you like a glove, then you're actually really easy to manage in that case. It's very easy to, that's the company and it does what it's going to do. But, I love my job working for, Comcast or whatever. All right. So I can think of plenty of horrible companies out there, and I mean, the Comcast is one of my favorite punching bags. But still, at the same point in time, you also have like this really good person job fit. And so regardless of what the company does, you still, you're going to get a lot of productivity out of that employee because fundamentally they just really like what they do. All right. And so that both of those are important. As a low-level manager or even a mid-level manager, you want to focus on person job fit more than person organization fit. All right, so that's usually if there's a poor fit between the person and the organization, it's just not going to work out in the long run. All right, and really, you're not going to have the power or the authority to actually be able to influence the organization as a whole in order to fix those problems. Now, if you're a CEO or an individual entrepreneur or something like that, of course you can do those things. Okay, but as a low-level manager, mid-level manager, you're going to have trouble with that. All right, and so it's much better to focus on person-job fit. All right, that is absolutely the first thing that many recruiters look at. So they try and find. And you've all been through the interview process, or if you haven't been through the interview process, you've seen other people suffer through it. Okay, but the whole idea behind the interview process is to basically shave out the missing information, the hidden information from both parties, from both the employer and from the employee, to try and find whether or not this individual is actually going to be a good fit for this job. Are they competent, capable? Are they able to do the job? Okay, those are usually your first basic questions. Then after that, it's more like, okay, are they going to get along with the team? Are they going to be able to do this kind of work even though we didn't actually put those expectations in our job description because HR told us not to, right? Okay, but the whole interview, the screening and the interview process is all designed to find the right people and make sure that they get the right jobs, okay? And find those good person job fit combinations that are fundamentally easier to manage. And that's the point behind all of this stuff, all right? right, is that, management problems, like 90% of them can be prevented with a little bit of planning and a little bit of legwork up front. And finding the right people is absolutely critical to that. All right. And so, it's going to start to beg the question, well, what are the right people? We'll get to that in a minute here. But understanding the centrality, the importance of person-job fit is the real key takeaway for you here. And so definitely focus on that one. All right. Let's dive into this one a little bit deeper here, because I could go on about this ad nauseum. But let's start finding ways to actually divide up people into different categories and whatnot. All right. And so there are basically three components to this. So the first one is values. Okay. And then the next one is personality, which we're going to spend a little bit more time on, particularly when we talk about personality traits. And then the last one is affect. All right. So positive and negative affect. That's all called mood and emotion in some cases as well. Basically the same thing. All right. Let's dive into each one of these. Values. So everybody develops their own values over time. A lot of them are inherited by your parents and things like that. They're kind of, how you're raised and what you come to believe. But then over time, they do start to evolve, and you start to develop your own value system, maybe taking a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit from your friends, things like that. And you start to develop, basically these guiding lights, these North Stars in your life. All right. They change over time, all right, which is different than some of the other things that we're going to talk about today. But value is one of the ones that's probably the more, it's probably one of the easier ones to figure out about people than the others. Okay, just because usually a value system, it's something that somebody's taken some time to develop. And so 9 times out of 10, I think most people are fairly proud of their values. And if you ask them, well, how do you feel about something? They'll tell you. Okay, and so understanding their value systems are really, really important for you as a manager, because they represent landmines or potholes that you can run into if you don't take the time to explore those in some respects. So it's important to know where somebody's loyalties lie. It's important to know, okay, what is kind of your goal, all right, and what actually makes you get up out of bed every single day. We'll get more into that in motivation theory, but it's deeply tied to value, all right, because values, think about it, a lot of us in the United States in particular value work ethic, okay? Work ethic is almost a value in its own right, because, when you have someone who's, their work ethic isn't as up to standard as maybe what yours is, automatically you see something as being deficient within them, all right? And so when we start making judgment calls about things like deficiencies or, laudable goals and skills and traits and abilities, those all involve value judgments upon our part, all right? One thing that's really important to understand about values is that there's 2 different ways to kind of classify them. And this is important for you to do as managers right off the bat, is start thinking about your values and the values of your employees in terms of terminal values, okay, or instrumental values, okay? And so terminal values refer to end states that people desire in life, such as leading a prosperous life in a world at peace, whatever. Okay, so it's what is the ideal down the road, okay? So not necessarily where I am right now, but what is it that I actually want out of this, and what is it that I feel is actually a justifiable or just outcome, all right, in a lot of cases. So terminal values would be almost not necessarily a state of being, but what you want to get out of it. So if you're young in your career and you want to move up really far, what is it that you actually want to accomplish? Is that actually a value in some ways? Say okay, so I want to be in a position where I can do this. The most common one that I hear from students is I want to be in a position where I can take care of my family. All right, that's terminal value state. Okay, if you think about that, it's okay, so my mom, maybe I grew up in a single parent household. My mom slaved over stove and worked 3 jobs, blah, blah, blah. So I want to make sure that I can buy her a house that she has, a really comfortable retirement. That would be a terminal value. Okay, it's not just a goal, all right, but also at the same point in time, within that goal is wrapped in this piece that's kind of oh, that's cool, it's that's important to you, all right. It doesn't have to be important to everybody in order for it to be a value, all right. The important thing is that it's central to you. Whereas instrumental values, and these are the ones that you're going to run into a lot more on the job, are acceptable modes of conduct, their ways of operating that are more important than actually where you're going. So it's how the road is traveled, not necessarily the destination, that actually matters. All right, and so you're going to run into all kinds of different people out there who have different instrumental values. Okay, there are individuals who are very by the book. You know, the rules are there for a reason, so you follow the rules. Okay, and then there's other people out there who take a much more like laid back approach to things. Okay, and so it's not necessarily about whether or not things get done exactly right every single time. It's that everybody gets along. All right, and so that can be an instrumental value at that point in time as well. And so there's a lot of different types of these that you kind of run into, and so they're not very easy to slice and dice. But if you think about it, there are people out there that you can distinctly tell, usually just by talking to them, you know, whether or not they're operating off more of a terminal value state or whether or not they, you know, or instrumental values are really important. So, you know, it's the classic, do the ends justify the means kind of thing. All right. That would be someone who has much more of a terminal value state. As opposed, are you a high road person? You know, that's much more of an instrumental value state. And so those are going to be important depending upon your industry, depending upon your, you know, your individual work circumstances. But when it comes down to values, that's one thing that you should think about in some respects. When people start expressing these things to you, is like, okay, do I want to help you get somewhere? Or is it more important that we do things in a certain way? All right. And in some industries, the answer is yes. All right. So actually, both of those things are important. And so you'll have to find ways to balance those. All right. Because sometimes, you know what? You know, okay, so this is the kind of place where nobody shows up 5 minutes late to a meeting, and that's really, really important, regardless of what actually the meeting is about. Okay, if that's the company culture, if that's the corporate culture, you're going to have to adhere to that in some respects. And so, you know, when you push your back against that and say, well, we don't do anything in the meeting, so who cares what time we're there? It's not actually the content of the meeting, it's the protocol that's actually really important. Okay, fine, adjust to that, all right? Likewise, you can have other places where, okay, so maybe it's about making our numbers at the end of the month, every single month. So there's a terminal value, but if it means that we're fudging things in between now and then and maybe pencil whipping a few data points here and there, that's okay as long as we don't get caught. All right, so if that actually strikes against your core values, you're going to have a tough time fitting in that company. All right, especially if it's the way that things have been done for a long time. And so keep those things in mind, and particularly when you're hiring. All right, people are very good about sharing their values in interviews. In fact, a lot of times there's a lot of ways in which they tip their hands, all right, to kind of like get some of the value systems out there. Oh, I work really hard, I'm never late, you know, as opposed to, you know, I'm all about accomplishing the company goals, blah, blah. So people will tip their hands in an interview process like that. Make sure that you're hiring people that fit the current value system, okay? Otherwise, they're going to have a rough time. And if they're having a rough time, that means more problems for you as a manager. All right, so be careful about that, all right? All right, moving on to personality. But hey, it's trivia time. So what's our topic? Nobody posted up a topic in there. What are we going to do? So I'm curious. What do you want to do? What did we do last week? Did we do... I think we just did general trivia last week, right? We can do that again. But if you post something up there before I get a chance to Google this, then yeah, absolutely. We will actually do a topic that is a little bit more specific, so because you get to pick these things too. Let's see. Nothing, no topics yet. Okay, all right. Let's see. I think I've been on this site before. All right, here's a good one. So, all right, so for a free mastery exercise, someone tell me, what is the largest island in the world? What is the largest island in the world? So, I actually knew this one. So, because it was in the news, like, what, 3 years ago? So, or something like that? Yeah, largest island in the world. So, for a free mastery exercise of your choice, Modules 1 through... No, it's not Australia. Yes, good job, Seth. It's Greenland. You got it first. Australia isn't an island. It's a continent. So, yeah, 1 of what? 7? Or did we reduce it down to 6? I don't think Europe and Asia are considered 2 different continents anymore. So, but yes, it's Greenland. All right, so good job. Looks like... who got that one first? Seth, you got that one first. So, but yes, the answer is Greenland, all right, which I guess we tried to buy a couple of years ago or something. So I don't know why. It's also like the least populated island out there. Bonus point. No, actually, I think it is independent. It is independent. It used to be part of Denmark, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's independent now, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it's a protectorate or something like that. I don't know. Anyway. Moving on, let's talk about personality. So good job. Just email me, let me know which one you want off. We'll do another one here in just a few minutes. So let's talk about personality, all right? So because personality conflict is, of the conflicts that you're going to deal with on the job, personality conflict, I mean, you can attribute most of those conflicts to some form of personality conflict. And so finding ways to productively think about personality as a manager is really important, okay? Because again, a lot of management is like heading off problems before they become problems, all right? And I mean, that's for several reasons. Not only does it give you like a lot more... it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of how you're actually going to go about your job on a given day if you're not just running around putting out fires all the time, okay? And so personality conflict is going to be a big driver of that, all right? And particularly if you have a personality conflict with somebody else on your team or, you know, maybe a peer or even your boss, which is the most difficult one to deal with in some respects. But let's talk about personality really. What is it? Personality is just like the personal makeup, the individual nuances, and relatively stable things that make you individualistic and unique from those around you that is not readily observable to other people, okay? So most of the time it manifests itself through behavioral patterns, and so there's a lot of debate on personality out there ever since it initially came out with, oh, that's fine. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you're right. On Greenland, yeah, it was... Leif Erikson actually named it Greenland to try and get people to go there because nobody wanted to go to Iceland because they're like, ugh, but actually it's kind of opposite. It's an interesting story. So yeah, that's my inner history nerd coming out of there, and I appreciate that. But anyway, let's get back to personality here real quick. But personality is one of those things that once you start dealing with large enough groups of people, you start to notice commonalities between different personality types. And personality types goes all the way back to like the beginnings of psychology, Carl Jung and the archetypes that he developed. And basically all of the work that's been done on personality kind of stems from that. Although nowadays they're taking a little bit of a different look at it. Now, one thing that you have to understand about personality is that most people think that it's relatively stable. So people actually study this. And they differ a little bit. Some people say it's basically, I mean, the newest stuff is like, well, your brain's not fully formed until you're like 25 or something like that. But that doesn't really have that much to do with personality. At least they don't think. And a lot of your, like, especially developmental psychologists will say that personality is kind of baked into you by the time you're between 6 and 9 years old. And in some cases, it's a little bit, maybe a little bit later if you go through some traumatic experiences as a child. But really, when it comes down to it, it's relatively stable over time. Now, personality and personality preferences are not necessarily predictive. They're just preferences, okay? And in my opinion, honestly, if you can let people work within their preferences, they're going to be easier to manage, okay? And so understanding some of these preferences is really, really important, okay? And so there's several different ways to actually look at personality out there, all right? There's a couple different tests, one of which is actually part of the Module 2 assignment, all right? So the manager's toolbox for the Module 2 assignments here is a light version of the MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And if you've ever taken one of those tests where it says, oh, I'm a ISTJ or ENFP or something like that, that's Myers-Briggs. It's been around since the 50s. And it's one of the more valid ways in which we actually... it's one of the more reliable ways in which we test personality, but there are a lot of questions about its validity. All right, and so we'll get into that in a minute because the book talks about it just in a couple minutes. But really, when it comes down to it, it's not a terribly practical tool as a manager. It's just there to actually get you to start thinking about some of these things. And if you haven't taken one of these before, they're actually kind of fun. All right, we'll go over the assignment here in a few minutes. So just because it's kind of interesting. All right, so but really, if personality is stable, what can you do about it as a manager? And the answer is not much. All right, so if you have a bona fide personality conflict, your ways of dealing with that as a manager are really restricted, because you can't just tell two people, hey, get along, or else, they'll find other ways to manifest their angst, their anxiety that the other generates in other ways that are just as unproductive as if they continue to work together and keep fighting all the time. All right, and so really, as a manager in these cases, you have to understand that, again, prevention is your best tool, all right, to use in these cases, because by the time you get to the point in time where there are problems, you're not going to have very many tools in your toolbox to be able to sort these out. Okay. And so understanding the different types of personalities out there is really important for you being able to design jobs and put the right people in the right spots by picking these things out from people early on. Okay. And so there's a couple different ones out there that we use. All right. MBTI is hands down the most common. All right, and so that's why I'm having you take it. It is the least predictive out of all of them. It's very reliable. They've had millions of people take it. Okay, and so the data that you get back from it is actually pretty reliable. The question is validity. So does it actually do that much? And the answer is not really. Okay, but there's an exception to that I'll get to in a minute. The one that actually does have a little bit more validity behind it is this one right here, what we call the Big Five personality traits, and it's been around for a little while. But the Big Five is different than MBTI. All right, so MBTI is what we call a dichotomous test, meaning that you're one or the other. You're either this far on the spectrum, or you're this far on the spectrum, or you're kind of in the middle. But even if you're in the middle, there is a cutoff point where so you're a little bit more inclined to be an extrovert than an introvert. It doesn't mean that you're straddling the difference right there. It means that you just haven't been asked enough questions on the test for us to get that fine of an answer. So when we talk about Myers-Briggs here in a second, I'll explain exactly how that works. Big Five is a little bit different. So it's not a dichotomous test. So what it is it's like each one of these in the ocean here are buckets that you fill. Okay, and the more that you fill that bucket, the more you will exhibit that particular trait. And so this one is a little bit more predictive of success than the MBTI, all right? Because technically you can fail this one. You can get zeros in all the buckets, which means apparently you don't have a personality. Or at least not one that's related to, positive work outcomes, which is what we see. So, yeah, this has been around for a little while. It got pretty popular at this point in time because people have been using Myers-Briggs for a long time. But there are basically 5 pieces, so thus the Big Five to this one. And the first one is openness. And so this is, your idea, how curious are you about the world around you? Are you, willing to try new things? Are you willing to, take risks and things like that? And so that's the first piece. The second one is the one that's actually predictive, and that's conscientiousness. And a lot of people think conscientiousness, there's a mistake about this where they think, oh, well, that means that you're considerate of other people's feelings. That's a different type of conscientiousness, okay? In this case, conscientiousness means being organized and being able to stick to a goal, all right? So saying, hey, I want to do this, and what is it going to take for me to do that, and then actually executing and following through that. And so that is the one that's actually related to success, all right? Now, these things are correlated. They're not causal, so I can't give you this test and say, oh, well, you scored really high on this, so I know you're going to be successful. That's not how it works, all right? It's correlated. It means that after we go out there and we find people who are successful, we give them the test, a lot of them have this, okay? More often than not. And so if you have trouble with things like time management, if you're a consistent procrastinator, if you're not very good at sitting down and making plans and then sticking to them, or at least being able to make a plan and then recognizing when you need to change the plan and going back and doing a new plan rather than just winging it. Okay, those are things that you probably should work on, all right? So, because let me just be really blunt with you about this, and I think I've talked about this before as a manager. If you can't manage your own time, you got no business telling other people how to do theirs. If you can't accomplish a task, the same thing is true. You have no business telling other people how to do their job, all right? And so people will expect that to you, especially the people who do possess this. All right, if you are, fairly organized and well put together as an individual, and you start working for someone who's just absolutely scatterbrained, it's infuriating, okay? And I have never been in a situation where, like, even I have fairly well put together as a manager, especially later in my career, all right? But if I was working for someone who was just absolutely, everything was off the rails all the time, and there's no organization, nobody knows what's going on around here and stuff like that. I'm going to tell you my perception of the quality of my manager went way down, and when that comes down, so many other things come down too. It's like, oh well, yeah, Bob's a train wreck, and don't pay attention to what he has to say. That would bleed down to my subordinates to the point in time where they would, even if they had stuff they had to take to him, they'd take it to me. That's not how the chain of command is supposed to work, but unfortunately that's true. And so this conscientiousness piece is one that they actually test for. Watch out for this one. If you're applying for a job or something like that, they say, oh, we're going to do some personality screening. Watch for this one, okay? Because this is one in particular where they're looking for two things, and this is definitely going to be one of them on there, okay? And now that you know that, you can basically hack the test. So, when we get to the ethical dilemma case studies, which isn't this module but the next one, there's actually one in the book here that talks about the ethics of personality testing. All right, and so is it okay for a company to directly try and test something like this? All right, is that cool? Is it okay for you to try and hack the test? I don't have a good answer to that one. All right, because quite honestly, I think that some of this stuff is a little bit intrusive, and quite honestly, it's not a company's business. But at the same point in time, they have a lot of power, and so they're allowed, to get away with things like this. All right, and so that's conscientiousness. The other one that's really important on this list is this one right here, extroversion. All right, and extroversion and introversion are often misunderstood in the terms of personality testing and the actual makeup. A lot of times people say, well, extroverts like to hang out with other people, and introverts are loners, and I mean, on the surface level, that's what it looks like, but that's not really what it means, all right? Extroversion and introversion are directly related to each other, but they're not related to how much you like other people or whether or not you're a misanthrope or whatnot, or, the life of the party kind of person. It's based upon how do you draw your energy, what actually recharges your batteries, okay? And so, like, I'm introverted, all right? So doing things like this, speaking, whether it be here to, the 30 of you on YouTube, or, 200 of you, or 3,000 of you down in a lecture hall or a presentation, I can get up there and I can do it. Yeah, it's not a problem. So public speaking doesn't freak me out. But I don't draw any energy from it. It makes me tired, okay? And so to recharge my batteries, I don't go hang out with my friends. I don't, track down my family and try and organize a movie night or something like that. No, I go and I find ways to spend time by myself because that's what recharges my batteries, okay? Whereas I have friends who are extremely extroverted, all right? I have one friend, he's a sweetheart, love him to death, but at the same point in time, he is miserable when he's by himself. And so, he just can't sit still. He can't relax in situations like that. Now, he likes to work in situations like that so that he can just plow through all the work and get it done and then go hang out with all his friends and things like that afterwards or bother people, whatever, or hop on the Facebook, which isn't always productive, but that's another story. So, but really when it comes down to it, he draws his energy from being around other people. And so ask yourself which of those two you kind of are. You probably know the answer to that question already. Now, the thing about this that's important to understand is that people in leadership positions, just like we can correlate success to conscientiousness, being in a leadership position is often correlated to being more extroverted than introverted. Now, is that to say that introverts don't make good leaders? Absolutely not. All right, there's nothing here that's predictive. All right, but at the same point in time, if I go out there and if I round up a pool of what I would consider to be 100 successful leaders, 60 to 70% of them are going to test as extroverts, all right? So they're correlated, they're not causal. All right, but understand why that is because leadership itself involves a lot of interfacing with other people. And if you just don't like it, all right, or if it's just draining, yeah, it's going to tap you out a little bit faster. You're going to have to find other ways to recharge your batteries, or at least more efficient ways to recharge your batteries if you're going to be put in a situation as leader, okay, where you're going to have to interface with a lot of people, and it's just not something that you get juiced off of, you know? And so that's important to understand. And so those are two things that I want you to think about in terms of personality when you're looking for commonalities amongst people around you. Or people who are working for you. You're going to have people who are very conscientious. They're going to be people that you can learn to rely upon, so identify them quickly when you're on the job. Same thing, you're going to have extroverts out there. You're not going to have to go find them. They're going to come find you, all right? Just understand that they recharge their batteries by being involved in things, okay? Likewise, you're going to have introverts on the job, all right? That's another category to look at that's really important. They're very industrious. They're typically very independent employees who do just fine without direction. Don't overmanage them. You don't have to. All right. So a little bit of prevention and just thinking about these things in terms of what you can do as a manager to kind of accommodate some of these personality differences will absolutely positively make your life a little bit better. The same thing, if you have someone who's really conscientious, this is not a person that you can micromanage. They're doing a better job of it on their own than you could ever do. And so don't insult them by going and say, hey, make sure you have this done by Friday. You know, they're like, yeah, I got it. In fact, you'll have it on your desk by Thursday night, you know. Come on. So it's easy stuff. All right. I'll let you read through some of these other ones in here. They're not as predictive as the two that I've covered. All right. But they are kind of interesting as well. All right. And so that's Big Five. Yeah, feel free. There's a test on here. I think I have another one. I thought I had another one in here, but maybe that was a previous class and the link didn't copy over. But there's other tests out there that you can do that are more rigorous on the Big Five. In fact, if you just Google it, I think it's through the University of Illinois or something like that. They have a version of the Big Five personality test that's like 300 questions long. It's extremely valid, okay? And, I mean, it takes you a good 20, 30 minutes to do it, but it's worth your time if you can find that. I'll see if I can find the link to it. The other one is the Myers-Briggs, which I'm going to run you through on the toolbox assignment, so let's talk about that one real quick. Just head on over here. It's actually in the assignments. So I'm in the lecture materials. Never mind. Here we go. The toolbox assignment. This guy right here. Click on that. And this link here will take you directly to the MBTI version that I found, which is called 16 Personalities. It's a website that, you know, I mean, they kind of want to sell you some kind of service and stuff, but you don't have to sign up for anything. It won't spam you. It won't dox you. None of that stuff. And so I find that it's a pretty, you know, it's kind of fun. It only takes a few minutes to take. So, but when you do take this one, a couple, like, tips for you, so to speak, is number one, nobody's going to judge you based upon what kind of answer you get here, unlike if, you know, you have a job that's trying to give it one of these. All right, here, that's not the case, so take it as honestly as possible. Don't overthink any of the answers that you're going to punch in there. Just punch them in as quickly as possible, and then when you actually do get your results, read through them carefully, and at the same point in time, start asking yourself some critical questions. All right, and so this is what I want you to do for this toolbox assignment. It's just 2-page assignment, all right, but answer these 3 questions and dive into it a little bit. Get a little reflective, all right? So do your results match your experience? Do you think that the test is actually speaking to you on a level where it's like, oh, actually that makes sense and I do that all the time? Or is it like, well, I never do that. The test is obviously broken. Either one of those are completely legit and rational responses in these cases. Just be sure to get specific on them, all right? And then ask yourself, what should I do with this information, all right? So even if you don't find it particularly useful, how does it help you as a manager, all right? Because I guarantee you there's people out there who are going to take the test and say, oh, this is me to a T, all right? So what kind of information is it providing you that's actually valuable? And then how can that help you become a better manager? So spend a little bit of time answering each of those questions. Yeah, 2 pages, so a paragraph on each one is absolutely fine as long as you get up to about that 2-page mark. Interesting assignment, and it's one that, you know, if you get into this stuff, there's a lot more different types of tests out there that you can take. So now the MBTI It gives you basically scores on a dichotomous scale where you're either one or the other. And so you're either an E or an I, you're an S or an N, a T or a F, or a J or a P. All right. And each of these forms 16 different archetypes out there that, are based upon a 4-letter code. The test that I'm giving you actually gives you a fifth one that doesn't mean anything. I mean, it might speak to you in some respects, but I've never seen too much lit that backed that one up. But these ones here, they've been really kind of dived into. The only one that I want you to think about on this one is E versus I. All right. So Myers-Briggs gets way too complicated to actually have everybody sit down in a group and take it and say like, oh, I'm an ENFP, you're an ISTJ, you're an ESTF, or ESTP, whatever. You can't manage with that many variables, all right? And so you got to take some of the variables off the table that really matter. The ones that matter are the ones that are already identified up here in the big five, which is introversion versus extroversion. Watch for that, okay? I mean, it's because you as a manager, you're going to know who your introverts and your extroverts are on like 3 days after you start that job. The extroverts are going to come find you. They're going to invite you to parties. They're going to ask for work to do with other people, things like that. They're going to seek you out. The introverts are going to keep cool, all right? They're going to watch you before they actually ask you for anything, all right? And so both of those different groups of people need different things, all right? So extroverts, they really do well when you put them in team situations. Even if there's not really a clear function for the team, they just like being part of the crowd, all right? They draw energy from it. They'll put a lot more effort into projects like that than if you go put them in the corner and tell them to audit something. All right, your introvert's much more independent, okay? So they don't need as much direction. They don't need as much, you looking over their shoulder and things like that. They don't need that interaction so much because that actually drains them a little bit more. It saps them of their energy, causes them a little bit more stress. I guarantee you, regardless of the size of your organization operation, if you have direct reports who are working for you, you're going to have a few of both, okay? And you're going to be able to find tasks that are more suited for one versus the other, all right? The more you can do that, the better off you'll be because you'll solve a lot of the other problems down the road. So last week you're talking about team projects, all right? So team projects are a real problem, all right? Especially when we just rando shuffle people together and put them in groups like that, all right? When I actually, in this class, when we do team projects, all right, and we're not going to do any for a grade, we might do some down the road that are just kind of fun, like one day kind of things. But I guarantee you, like, I never try and actually put all the extroverts on one team or all the introverts on one team. So don't fall into that trap either. Because they'll fight. They'll all duke it out, all right? So if you have, like, think of it as like a team project, like a school, you have to do this project and it has a written component and a presentation, and you put all extroverts on one team, all the extroverts will fight over who gets to do the presentation. Nobody wants to do the paper. And likewise, if you have an introverted group and you put everybody in that one and you put them all on a team project and it's got a paper, they'll fight over the paper and they'll neglect the presentation completely. So you have to have a little bit of a mix. Just make sure that you have tasks for each people. Things will go so much smoother, okay? So, and I guarantee you're going to be able to find ways to do that on the job. All right? All right, last thing we're going to talk about is affect, but let's do another trivia question here. And then this will only take a couple minutes to talk about, and then we'll wrap up here pretty soon. Let's see. General trivia, because nobody asked for a trivia question, unless we really were going to do Epstein. We're not going to do that. So let's see. Let's just find something general here. Let's see. I think I already asked that one. I don't know. I've asked so many of them based upon different classes. Let's see. Oh, okay. Here's one for you Wheel of Fortune fans out there. What is the most common letter in the English alphabet? Most common letter in the English alphabet. So go for it. Most common letter in the English alphabet. Most commonly used letter. So, got some guesses out there. I don't know if anybody even watches Wheel of Fortune anymore. Nope, it's not C. It's not S. It's not C. Nope. Common letter. Most common letter. Yes, Nick, you got it. It is E. RSTLNE. It's the value always pick. So, very good. So, good job, Nick. You got it. It is E. So, all right, now everybody's jumping in there. You all let it Google it that fast. It's RSTLNE. Any Scrabble players out there? Yeah, there's a reason why it's only worth 1 point. Good job. Yep. You got the trophy, man. So, all right, positive and negative affect. We will cover this here real quick and then move on. We should talk about self-esteem too because it's really, really important. But that's okay. Let's talk about affectivity. So, affect is basically just how people feel about things. And this one's important to understand because people overall, they do cut one way or the other. So you do have, yeah, you bet. So if you do have individuals and you have more than a couple days to observe them, you'll notice that people generally do have a little bit more of a positive outlook or a little bit more of a negative outlook. Both of those things are absolutely fine, all right? They can work well with each other. I guess the problem is that when you actually get too many of those people in one spot, then you start to have some problems, okay? Because they don't really balance each other out. All right, and so if you've ever worked in a situation where everybody in the office was just they were competing to be the office Eeyore kind of thing, that's not a productive place to work, and it's not a very fun place to manage, all right? And so there's a lot of things that are related to this, but at the same point in time, the flip side is just as bad, where if everybody is completely upbeat about things all the time, it sounds like a great place to work, but I guarantee you there's problems that are going on around there that aren't being addressed, and that's the problem, all right, with having a little bit too much of a positive outlook, or at least too much of an optimistic office environment in some ways, because fundamentally, being able to like overlook problems is different than being able to solve problems, okay? And if it's a problem that goes on long enough, it becomes not your problem, it becomes the company's problem or the problem of everybody else around you. Classic example of this is probably Enron. Everyone's like, no, it's fine, man, it makes a lot of money, blah blah blah. Well, there's fraud going on. Don't worry about that. So not very many people know about that. Eventually became everybody's problem. The whole thing went belly up. All right. Now that does happen in certain cases. All right. But, it's not quite as common, where this becomes this really is one of those huge things. It's just, this is one of those things that you're going to deal with as a manager. All right. So you're going to have employees who complain. All right. And they just like to complain. And it's one of it's their favorite thing. It's the thing that they look forward to every single day. And let me give you a really blunt piece of management advice. Let them. Okay. So, over the course of my career, every job that I've worked, including this one, and I'm not talking about my coworkers here, but I've certainly seen this out of students. All right. Well, actually, I have seen it out of a couple of my coworkers. I'm not going to name any names. So, but at the same point in time, it's just there are people out there who they just want you to listen to them for like a couple minutes. Because they find something validating about the fact that, hey, this sucks and blah, 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 I need to get this off my chest kind of thing. And oftentimes they just don't realize that they need to get it off the chest. It's just the way that they are in some respects. And so usually what I would do is, like, I remember I had this one guy who was working for me a long time ago when I was at Frontier Airlines. And I mean, he was like the most negative person, and not like nasty negative. It was just like all bad. We're going bankrupt next week. It's never going to work out. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to get jacked on my shift. You guys are going to shortchange me on my check. Yada, yada, yada. And I mean, he had broken managers with this attitude. Okay, over the years. And, he's just, they learned to ignore him, which would make it worse because he would go out there and do it even more. Okay, kind of thing. But really when it came down to it, when I started managing with him, it didn't take me more than 10 minutes to figure out kind of, okay, he's a cat of this stripe, so got it. But there's a very effective way to, it's just to listen. All right. It's just to listen. And then it's to listen, but only so much. All right. And that's kind of the trick behind it. It's like, all right, so he'd come, Max, what do you got for me today? And so he would start going on, blah, 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 blah. Okay. All right, man, I'll look into it. I'll see what I can do. And you got to do this genuinely. You can't do it where it's like, yeah, come on. You can't do that. All right. So yeah. Okay. I understand. I hear what you're saying, Max. And, you're right. That might be a problem that we can do something about, but I'm going to have to look into it. But here's the trick. I would only give him one. Only give him one every single day. All right. And after a little while, he started to chill out about this stuff, all right, because he still got just enough off his chest each individual day where he felt a little bit better, okay, because he felt like I was actually listening to him, which I was, all right. But at the same point in time, I didn't let him get to that point in time where he would start building his own trap. All right, because sometimes you just let people go on and on. It's this and this and this and this and this. And then, they kind of work themselves into this position where it's just like, oh my God, it's awful. And the same thing is true with people who are really, a little bit too positive about things. Every office, every work environment has that one person that people just can't stand on Monday. Okay, because it's like, oh my God, it's Monday. Shut up. Okay, I don't want to be here. All right, I'm still hungover, or whatever. All right, so you do have people like that, and you can treat them the exact same way, okay? So if you have people who need to express themselves in terms of either positive or negative affectivity, you let them do it, but you also limit that and say, okay, so it's time to get to work. All right, on these things. It does work. Positive affective people tend to be a lot happier at work, again, but they do have like their shortcomings as well. They tend to see some things that aren't necessarily there or necessarily true, and sometimes they can be a little bit dangerous if they're way off base on something and they don't even know. There are situations where that works out poorly for them as well. Okay, and I mean, I'm not going to quite agree with this statement right here. So if the people at the top have too much positive affectivity, you do get into one of those cases where, we've got kind of rose-colored glasses going on here, and you do need to keep yourself leveled in those situations. So here's my advice to you as far as dealing with this as a manager goes. If you have a little bit more of an optimist, like I'm a bona fide optimist about a lot of things, okay? I think, most of the things that are going on out there in the business world are fine. I'm very optimistic about your prospects to be able to get great jobs in the next couple of years. I'm convinced that I'm going to retire early. Okay, so there's a lot of positivity in my life. And yeah, some of that, of course, is self-imposed, but I always make sure that I pay attention to the people who are a little bit more negative than I am, all right? So it's one of those things, well, what do you see that I'm missing, all right? What's going on with this, and things like that, and let it out, all right? Because, that it's balancing in some ways, and it's really good for you, all right? So I work with negative. This is a great little bird. I think I talked about almost all this stuff, but yeah, some of these boxes in here have really good management tips. All right, so if I don't talk about them specifically, definitely check these out. All right, let's see. We don't need to talk about this too much. That's pretty straightforward. Self-esteem, that's the thing that I wanted to skip ahead to. We're just going to talk about this really briefly, and then we'll do one last trivia and call it quits here because we're getting close to time. All right, so self-esteem is the degree to which a person has overall positive feelings about his or herself. So it's related to self-confidence. It's like, do you feel capable of actually tackling certain things? And if something goes bad, are you able to see past that moment of doubt and things like that, the self-doubt? And actually diagnose a problem in a way that's productive, and are you able to move forward from that? Self-esteem is absolutely positively one of the things that we see in very capable leaders. They do have a lot of self-esteem. That's not to say that they don't also have their doubts and things like that, but at the same point in time, they're willing to actually take upon those responsibilities, accept responsibility for those situations, and that includes both the praise and the lumps that come with it. And so people who have a little bit higher self-esteem tend to have higher levels of satisfaction in their job. There's no trick to being able to build this other than to go out there and make mistakes and recover from them. Okay, so some people, I don't know, maybe many of you have worked with little kids. There are some little kids, like in preschool and stuff, it's like, man, you were just a fountainhead of self-esteem. I hope you don't get beat up in middle school over this stuff, because I hate to see you lose it. And then I've known people who are in their 70s, who have no self-esteem whatsoever. And so, it's not a function of age. I think it's a function of making mistakes, being reflective about those, and being able to move on afterwards. Okay. And so if you do make a mistake, the best thing to do right away when you make a mistake is own up to it. All right. So, that's the first step in that direction. The next one is also understand that, just because you made a mistake today doesn't mean it's going to be a mistake tomorrow, even if you make the same decision. Okay. So don't overlearn your lessons. And then last but not least, really, when it comes down to it, you just got to take some risks, all right? If you take some risks out there, some of them are going to work out and some of them aren't, all right? So don't beat yourself up for the ones that don't. And, but at the same point in time, don't pat yourself on the back too much for the ones that are. That is also counterproductive to building self-esteem. There's a lot of stuff out there on that. I'll let you kind of get into it. But at the same point in time, understand that if you have employees working for you that have very low self-esteem, they're not going to speak up in a lot of situations, and that's what you need them to do. So you need to work on creating an environment where it's okay for them to do that. It's okay for them to take the risk and realize that not everything around here is do or die, sink or swim kind of stuff. All right, that as a manager, I have your back, all right, in a lot of things. And, I try and do the same thing with students. In this class, I know it feels a little bit different, but, all the time I get people every single, well, what happens if I miss an assignment? It's like, I'm not going to kill you, all right? So, well, you're going to take away points? No, not in this class. It's okay. So just do it. Just do your work. It's all right, man. And, man, it's hard for some people to see that because, again, the way that you lose self-esteem is when you take risks and they don't pan out and you internalize that message as opposed towards, it's like, oh, I'm a failure, or oh, I can't believe I blew that, or kind of thing. And then not being able to move past that and realize, oh, actually, that doesn't make me a bad person. It just means I jacked this up. All right. Hate to be that flippant about it, but there's not really that much good advice on that one. That doesn't involve, pretty extensive therapy. So, but from a management standpoint, make sure that you make it known that this is a place where it's okay to make mistakes. All right, I got you. All right, and so because self-esteem eventually translates into self-efficacy. All right, and then this is where job performance comes back to. So we're going to tie it back to job performance. Self-efficacy is when you have the confidence in the belief that you're actually able to accomplish something, and so you set out to do it with that mindset that I'm going to have this done. All right, and so that makes people much more productive on the job. There are so many things coming down the road. All right, that will tie back to self-efficacy. So like if I tell you to do something and you don't believe that you can do it, chances are you're going to fail at it. Or if I tell you to do something, you believe you can do it, but I don't give you the tools to do it, you're going to fail at it, and it's going to affect your self-efficacy, which is going to tie back to your self-esteem afterwards. So you're going to be really careful with this stuff because it is all kind of linked together. And this fits back to person-job fit, which is where we kind of started today. All right? Because you want to hire people who are capable of performing tasks, training people to increase their self-efficacy, which actually can be more effective. This is one thing that we see out there that actually is tied to productivity. So there's different ways that we can assess this. All right, if we assess this in a certain way, all right, 9 times out of 10, when we see employees who are more productive, they're higher in self-efficacy, okay? Meaning that, hey, I got this, all right? and of course, that stems from self-esteem, all right? And so, like I said before, this all ties right back together to what we were talking about initially with person-job fit. These are some of the different ways in which you can determine whether or not someone's going to fit for a job. If it's a high-demanding job, yeah, you're going to need someone with a lot of this. If it's a job that involves a lot of criticism, you're going to need someone with this. If it's a job that actually, where you're going to be dealing with a lot of people on a regular basis, yeah, you're going to look for someone who's got a little bit of this. Is it a job that's very detail oriented and it needs, a very careful mind that's organized? Yeah, you're going to need some of this. All right. And so that's why personality, mood, motion, affect, these are things that really do matter for you as a manager, because ultimately what you're doing is you're looking for the people who fit the job well. Now, when we get deeper in the class, we'll talk about tailoring jobs to fitting people, but really when it comes down to it, there's got to be a fundamental connection between the person and the job in order for this to be, something that you can actually work with as a manager. All right, because oftentimes you're going to look at a job, you can't change that much of it. You can't change the schedule, you can't change the pay rate. Okay, you can't change what they do because this is how they've all done it. Let alone you get into a union environment where you can't change nothing. Okay, and you're going to find it really frustrating dealing with some of these problems because you can't really pick the people who are on the bus. And likewise, when you first start out, you're rarely going to get to pick your own people, and it's going to take time and it's going to take effort to actually get to the point in time where you can actually start doing some of that stuff. But really, you're going to have to deal with what you've got. And so the more that you understand like the different ways to kind of cut personality, the easier it will be to find, oh, okay, so maybe I can't change Jerry out, but he's not so good with the details, so maybe I give this responsibility to someone else because I can still have him focus on this. Or likewise, okay, we got a sales team, I'm going to need someone to go out there and actually make contact with the clients, and then I'm going to need someone who actually does the follow-up. Well, okay, maybe your extrovert should do some of the initial contact, and maybe your introvert should do some of the follow-up on there. So they're not getting the phone slammed on them every 5 minutes. There's always little things you can do. All right, and so the more of that you spend time looking at, and that the more you understand how all these things kind of tie together, the fewer problems you're gonna have a manager, which is going to leave you more time to actually do more effective things as a manager. Okay. All right, so that's chapter 2 in a nutshell, chapter 3 in a nutshell. There's a little bit more after this, but this is the kind of the beefy part of it. So, that'll do it for this week's lecture. We're going to do a trivia here. Just one last reminder: be here on Wednesday because we're gonna do an exercise that is specifically designed to help you start wheedle some of this information out of people. Okay, and so it's going to be fun. Well, at least I hope it's going to be fun. I've had fun with it in the past. And since you're all going to be on the Zoom that day, hopefully there won't be too many conflicts. But again, we're going to start to dive into personality a little bit and start to find tools, or at least a few skills that will help you, interface with people a little bit better on these things. All right. So, but with that being said, we have one last trivia question for us here today before we wrap up. Ooh, right on time. So let's see. Is this true? I have to Google this one. Let me see. Oh my gosh. All right, it is true. All right, so here you go. I did not know this one. All right, so for a free mastery exercise, well, I guess unless you already got one today, because that's still the rule. You only get one per day. All right, so we have to limit it that way. But for the last question of the day, can someone tell me the name of the Twitter bird? Apparently the Twitter bird the actual logo has an actual name. What is it? Go for it. I did not know this, and I just Googled it. I want the full name, by the way. So go for it. I did not know this. No, it's not Ben. Did you just guess on that one? Or maybe my information is wrong. It's not what I got. The Twitter. Yes, good job, Sanjay. It's Larry T. So Larry T. Bird. Okay. Oh, wow. You didn't put the bird on there. Okay. So I don't know. I should take that one away from you, but I'm not going to. Sarah, you were the first one to put up the full name, Larry T. Bird. So I'll give it to you as well on this one, Larry T. Bird. Does it have anything to do with a basketball player? I'm just curious. So I don't know. Let's go find out. Twitter bird's name. So Larry Bird, the basketball legend. Okay, all right, fine. I guess it does have to do with Larry Bird. So, all right, cool. Yeah, Jose. I love it. So, Jeffrey Bird. So no, apparently it is Larry T. Bird. So I'll give that one to you both, Sanjay and Sarah, on that one, and we will call it good for the week. So hope to see you Wednesday. If you have any questions between now and then, please ping me. And regarding the work in this week, I'll post up here, but you should be working on module 2. We got 2 weeks to do it, so you got plenty of time. All right, so I just want to make sure you kind of keep on track here so you don't get too jammed up towards the end. But at the same point in time, I do want you to be here on Wednesday because I have an experiment I want to try, and I hope it goes well. So hope to see you there. I'll stick around here for a couple minutes just in case you have any questions. But if you're good, we'll catch you on Wednesday. See you now. Oh yeah, if you got one of these quizzes, you gotta email me. Tell me that which one you want. So just so you know, just so I know. Yes, that's correct, Ashley. If you're here on Wednesdays, I'll totally give you credit for the discussions. No problem. Yeah. So I think Wednesdays are probably going to be. I hope they're a little bit more fun than doing the board discussion, or at least a little bit different, because I know a lot of classes have those. So yeah, no, I see them as substitutes for each other. So feel free either way. You too. Take care now. Any other questions? Give it about 30 seconds. All right, that'll do, folks. We'll see you.